People always ask how I balance my family life with 400 shows a year. I'm just doing what I love with the people I love. It's my magic life.
I like Wes Iseli. I like everything about him.
All right, our guest today is Ron Conley. If you've ever heard of Conley's House of Magic in Myrtle Beach, you know the man. I first met Ron in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, when I went to Myrtle Beach on vacation. I walked into his shop called Conley's House of Magic. Every year on vacation, when I went to his shop, whoever I was with, my parents, a girlfriend at the time, or more recently, Natalie, they knew that when I walked in that shop, I was going to be there for a while.
Yeah, I hung in for, the first couple times we went. I stayed in the shop with him for I don't know how long, 2 hours, 3 hours. And then finally, I think on our third trip, the third year we went there, I went in, I probably stayed for a good half hour. And then I said, okay, I'm going to go around to the Christmas shop or the other shop. I'll come back and get you in a little while.
I was in there for 6 or 8 hours on vacation. That was a day I planned for vacation. But whoever I was with, eventually, they would go out and go shopping on their own. Kid in a candy store is an understatement. I get nostalgic just thinking about the magic shop. He always had World's Greatest Magic playing on the TVs, his demo table, his performance table, and wall-to-wall real magic, not just pitch magic that you'd expect in a tourist town. This was a magic shop. Anyway, I can go on and on about the guy and about his magic shop, but let's get to it. Everybody, it's Ron Conley. Woo! What's up, buddy?
I was just thinking while you were talking, I probably should have had a little counter there and served coffee and hot dogs or something. Everybody could have lunch there.
Oh, my. Wes would have stayed there even longer.
Oh, man.
Yeah, those were the days.
Man, I love that magic shop. And talking to you and hearing stories from the road, I always made sure to buy something from you, Ron. I don't know if you realize that or not. But I loved your magic stories. I loved hearing, the Hell's Angels story. You told me that yesterday, but I remember you telling me that at the shop as well. And man, I loved it. So let's get started with this thing. How'd you get started in magic?
Oh, I did a magic show in the first grade. I didn't at the time. I don't think I had seen a magician, and I don't think I knew what magic was. But I did what amounted to a magic show, and then. Then it was on and off, but by, probably the 9th grade, I had decided that that's what it was going to be. I had to be a magician, But, I went through all the magic set stage, and then my dad actually introduced me to a magician named Howard Hocus Hendrickson, and he lived nearby, and he loaned me equipment and Terabell books, and so I had a little act, and he helped me a bit. And then the clincher was when I saw Al Wheatley, Chop Chop, perform, and that sealed it right there. He produced 8 doves from a change bag.
Wow.
A chicken, and he did card work and fire reading, and me and my friend were the only kids at the show. Everybody else was just adults all dressed up, and we were the only kids there. And the magician was on in the first half, and then at intermission we had this discussion about whether we should stay or not, because it was all singing, which we didn't come for. And but then we finally decided that the magician was so good that surely he would have to be on in the second half again. And we stayed, and he wasn't on, but that was quite an experience. Yeah.
Wow. So right after high school, you joined the military?
Yeah, I went into the Air Force, and I was stationed after boot camp in tech school. I went to a missile site in Niagara Falls, New York. And as soon as people at the missile site found out I was a magician, they transferred me out of there. In other words, I couldn't be in the building where they had the missiles at because I was a magician. I thought that was kind of interesting. But,
that's weird. Huh.
Yeah, it is. it's kind of,
What were they going to think you were going to do? Distract people?
I don't know.
That's
I don't
funny.
know.
That's
I
funny.
have no idea. I said, okay, what do I say?
Right.
So where'd you grow up at?
Well, I was born in Redmond, Oregon, raised in Pendleton, Oregon, and I went to high school in Salem, Oregon. So I'm from Oregon. Haven't been back there in a long time, but that's where I'm from.
So then you ended up in Niagara Falls. Now, where was the Ripley's Magic Shop? Was that Niagara Falls as well?
Well, the Ripley's had a museum in Niagara Falls, and when I was at the air base, I worked for Gene Gordon in Buffalo on weekends, and then after I got out of the service, I tried to buy his shop, and my financing fell through, and then it just happened that Henry Mueller, who owned the Houdini Magical Hall of Fame, was looking for a magician, and Gene recommended me, and me and Mary and Bart moved to Canada. We were actually landed immigrants. I never knew that. I just filled out the papers and did whatever they told me to do, but we were actually immigrants from the United States.
Wow.
And so I had the magic shop there, but that was my first connection with Ripley's, and later on I ended up working for Ripley's, and we had 5 magic shops with them. And but I learned the magic shop business more or less from Gene Gordon, and then Houdini shop was more tourist oriented, and I learned that part of the business. And then Ripley's was opening a museum of witchcraft and magic in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and that's where my first shop was. I was the end magic part of the thing. They had a legitimate witchcraft museum, and I was sort of a buffer because that was a questionable museum right there in the Bible Belt. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. Wow.
But it was interesting. When I joined Ripley's, I thought it was more like Lowell Thomas, and I wanted to catch up, so I went to New York and looked up witches, and it was an interesting experience. And but while I was with the Ripley's, we did meet a lot of witches and stuff, and legitimate witches, and it was quite a different experience.
Well, when Natalie was pregnant with our first kid 9 years ago, we went on vacation. Instead of going to Myrtle Beach or another beach, we ended up, because she was so late in her pregnancy, we went to Salem just to do research and just to see everything and look around, because how can you believe all these people burned witches and all this stuff? And as magicians, we know the tricks of the trade, and we know what's real, what isn't, and what's capable of taking place. And I don't know. I've been yelled at and accused of being a witch. I'm sure people have yelled at you as well, being at the end of the museum. No matter what you do, you could do, the simplest pitch magic trick, a magic coloring book, or nickels to dimes, and they'd yell at you for being a witch just because you're associated with the museum.
Yeah. Well, we didn't really have any problems there, but we did sell. We sold crystal balls and tarot cards, and we had little kits for spells and stuff like that. We had a line of merchandise that was bent in that direction, But and then when we're in San Francisco, there was the hardcore witches were there, and they're to be avoided, I would think.
Wow. Yeah. That's a whole nother world. That's a whole nother world.
Yeah, it is. But anyway, Ripley's was a great experience for me, and so was Houdini's. When I went to Houdini's, I wasn't really quite ready for that, but it was a great experience for me, running the magic shop, and we had guided tours there at the museum, and it was a kind of ahead of its time and just out of the traffic flow, and and so business was a little bit slow there. Eventually they moved to a better location, but then they didn't have a better museum. The first museum was really great. It was really great. And I got to meet a lot of great people. Melvin Christopher and Walter Gibson walked in the door one day, and
Wow.
I was not sitting down with them and having a conversation, and we had. There's probably a lot of great magicians that I didn't even recognize that came through, or a lot of potential great magicians that came through there. Susie Wanda's came through there, and there's just published a book on her career, but she was one of the hottest acts in Europe, and I don't know how old she was at that time, but my wife and I thought we were old, or she was old, so we were. Henry Mueller had a little hotel next to, or near the museum, and she was staying there. And she came, I think, to try to get some of her husband's things in the museum. Zina Bennett, he did manipulation with jumbo cards, and so when we were asked to escort her around town and take her to dinner and show her the sights and stuff, and when we went to her hotel room, the strangest thing happened. She made us come in the room, and we had to sit on the edge of the bed, and she got out her cards and her coins, and she did front and back palming and split fans and moves that I've never seen, and she did coin work, all real sophisticated magic. With one hand she vanished 7 coins one at a time, and then produced them again all one at a time. It was just absolutely perfect, so.
And this was early 80s?
Yeah, she knew that we were looking at her like she was an old lady, and she wasn't. She was a sleight of hand artist, and she showed us, and that, of course, changed our whole attitude, but that was one of the, and then a lot of other guys. Francis Martineau was there, and Duke Stern, and I can still see Duke Stern standing in front of the museum and looking at the outside saying, "The boy, magic needs more people like this," so.
Well, and it needs brick and mortars nowadays. I mean, if we're going to keep this art alive, it's got to be, we need something. It's really hard online because it's like the Wild West, and a kid goes online and they learn really advanced stuff, but they have no idea in the basics, and there's nowhere really for them to go to learn. And I'm glad I came up when I did, because I feel like I learned in a traditional way, and I had to learn to crawl before I walked.
Yeah, well, that was a difference in my shop. My shop contained not only basic magic but utility items, but nothing nowadays seems to be basic or utility, so I could tell that change right away,
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you were with Ripley's and Houdini's museum, were you like the manager over the different locations, or were you the dealer there? Did you order for everybody? How did that work?
Yeah, well, we had a shop. The first shop was in Gatlinburg, and then we had one in of course, Myrtle Beach here, and one in Estes Park, Colorado, and one in St. Augustine, and we had one on the wharf in San Francisco, and I designed all the shops and bought the merchandise and set them up, and then at the beginning of every year, I had to make a large buy, for all the shops, cards, cups, and coins, and in fact, Paul said I placed the largest order in the history of Robbins Company, so, of merchandise. And I'd go to every shop, a couple of times a year and work with them and, redo displays and, train people. And we had some really great crews. And, in fact, at one time, nearly all the demonstrators for Magic Masters came from out of our shops, So.
Oh, wow. Well, that's what I was going to ask. Any magicians come out of that? Where you trained them in the basics to do pitch magic, and they became, magicians? Any names come top off your head?
Yeah, nothing pops up right now.
Yeah.
Mike Abson was my first demonstrator I ever hired, He was, the main man for Magic Masters, and we had a fellow named Bruce Pancake who is now a brain surgeon.
Oh, wow.
I should probably look him up. Speaking of the demonstrators, we had in a tourist shop, if a demonstrator can do string galley deck and the cups and balls and nickels to dimes, he wouldn't really necessarily have to know anything else. I mean, there's other things to sell, but if he can sell those, he's paying his way. And so we're stretched. We're very adamant about everybody being able to be good at those. And I had a demonstrator one time. His name escapes me right now. Mike, I can't think of his last name, but he believed me. And one time we were in a conversation with me and his girlfriend and some other people, and we were talking about death, and he told me, Michael Hutchinson, I think was his name, he said to me that he already knew how he was going to die. He was going to die in an automobile accident. And of course I said, well, how would you know that? But he didn't have an answer. But later on, he actually did die in an automobile accident. And then the kicker is that when they had his funeral, he, according to his request, was buried with his string galley deck and cups and balls and nickels to dimes.
Wow.
So,
wow.
How's that for devotion, anyway? Yeah.
Wow.
You mentioned before about the Hell's Angels.
Yeah.
There was a club in Buffalo called Frank's Casanova, and I worked there a lot. And we had like a variety show, but we also had generally a couple of strippers there. So I worked there one time for 2 weeks, and the only audience at that time was Hell's Angels. Nobody else would come in, and they kind of like took over the whole club. And I can remember standing backstage the first night, and I've got tails and patent leather shoes on, and I'm going to produce soap bubbles. and my audience is Hell's Angels. And the ventriloquist, a fellow named Johnny Main, he says, "No, don't worry about it," and he encouraged me, and I went out, and sure as heck, they liked it. And the whole week was really easy, and I remember one time I'm doing the soap bubbles, and one guy, and we had a stage that came out into the audience, and one guy at the end of the stage stood up and hit this other guy, knocked him on the floor, and he said, and then he stood over me, he said, "See, I told you, soap bubbles." So the guy on the floor kind of gets up on his knees and looks at me, and he says, "Yeah, soap bubbles."
What the heck?
Oh,
so
my.
that was, but I had no problems. I had no problems with them, and they liked the magic and stuff. But magic goes good in that type of environment, And we had a lot of places. We had in Buffalo at that time. There was a stage door, and there was Stage Miguel, and there was a town casino, and there was 5 or 6 clubs, Club Sheridan, and Redwood Lounge. They all had like stages, and they'd have like variety shows, and they were in neighborhoods, a lot of them. It was so it was a good start, and all the magicians, like Robbie Allen, they all worked there too. And so it was about 3 or 4 of us working in those places, and we just sort of traded off. One time I came out, Franz Casanova and Doug Henning and Ward Thomas and Robbie Allen were sitting in the audience. That was kind of a surprise, especially when I dropped a coin. So.
Oh, no.
Wow. But you got to know, I know you and Rob Allen are friends, but as far as Doug Henning, were you guys friends, friendly? You knew each other pretty well?
Yeah, when he would do shows occasionally in Niagara Falls, and every time he did, he'd come by the museum and see me, and he bought a few things, but he'd always invite me to the show, and he'd literally give me a notebook and a pencil and tell me to come to the show and write constructive criticism, and I would. And as usually happens when you got a magician in the audience, especially if you know it, he made a lot of mistakes that I wrote down, but that's just part of the business, it just happens that way. And when he he had a Christmas show at the Royal Alexander in Toronto, and that's where he was picked up by the people from Broadway. The people who did Godspell and Pippin saw his show. He was in the theater for a couple of weeks, and it was a show that Doug Henning had written himself. And after they made arrangements for him to come to New York, they had like an off-Broadway theater in Toronto where Doug was performing. And so I went out there one night to see the show. And after the show, Doug Henning and his girlfriend, I think her name was Moon, we all went to her parents' house. And the strangest thing was that the people, her parents and everybody, were just so enamored with him. They just, they were standing close to him and they would touch him, and they were just, it was just unreal how they just adored him, and he'd do little tricks, nothing serious, just little standard tricks. And then when they found out I was a magician, they wanted me to do something. And I tried real hard not to do anything. I kept turning them down, because I think when you're in somebody else's place, you don't work. You help them look good, but you don't. You never work in somebody else's place, And he hadn't done anything that was, real sophisticated, so to speak. But finally, he made me do something. So I did a haunted deck, and it just blew those people away. But it also killed the night. It just spoiled everything. I felt like a jerk, because it just was so much better than everything that he was doing. But you always remembered that, and so nowadays if I'm faced with that same situation, I make sure I don't do anything. You shouldn't do that. You should just, let everybody do their own show, and
Yeah, that's hard. That's a real hard thing. Yeah.
But I really felt bad about that, because Doug Henning was a really nice kid. There's no way you could be mean to him. He was just everything. When he got that Broadway show, he got a lot of criticism from local magicians, and he just sucked it up and went and did his thing. And later on, I went to New York and saw the show, and he took me to dinner with the cast, and he was just really a nice kid. And I always thought that his secret to success was he was the first hippie magician right there on Broadway. And I thought that, well, eventually as he gets old, he'll be like the grandpa magician, and all the kids that see him when they were kids would bring their kids to see him, and he would roll along. But when he was trying to get back into that, he got cancer and went quickly. So, but real nice fella.
I've never heard a bad thing about him from anyone. Everybody loved him. When we went to the Magic Castle, people were talking about how great he was, and that he used to come there, and everybody has a story with Doug. But your trick that you did, the haunted deck, I mean that's a powerful trick. If someone's never seen that trick and was staging it in patter and everything, you can blow people away. So I can see how that could have. He did Fickle Nickel, and you do haunted deck. I mean it's day and night different. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a strong trick. Not a lot of people do it nowadays, but we did it in the magic shop, and we figured a way of taking it off, and we added some, we changed the mechanics of the trick a little bit, and so we made it better. We could do it on the spot, and we could do it no matter how we were dressed and stuff, So
that's awesome. Well, you were talking about the Hell's Angels, and then you talked about the Stage Door and some of those other places. But you said the Stage Door was a really rough place too. I mean,
Yeah, there were. I know people had been killed in their parking lot.
wow.
That was. I guess my first agent had an office above the Stage Door. His name was Norm Malone, and he not only was a booking agent, but he was a private investigator. So when I'd come,
that's a mix.
He'd be sitting behind the deck with a shoulder pistol, and I don't know. I just always got a kick out of that, But he was a real nice fella, and he booked me in there. My first booking in that place, Norm Malone.
Well, and you were talking about the other places that you worked in. Was that a place that Rob worked with you, Rob Allen? Did he work at Stage Door? And you said Eddie Spector's Bar. Were you and Rob both part of the original of that?
Yeah, we every Friday night, the Magiclife would meet out there, and he had a room upstairs above the bar that had a stage. So when we had lectures, they would do it up there. And but every Friday night, a regular group of magicians would meet out there, and there was Mike Skinner and Lou Gallo and Matt Gallo's dad and Eddie Dunn and Bill Okel. They were all heavy into card stuff and cards and coins, and anybody that wanted to perform could perform. There was no rules. There wasn't any house magician except for Eddie Fector, which was the greatest. And but the fun part, the best part of the whole thing is going out to breakfast afterwards. So after the bar closed, Eddie would take, usually 8 or 10 people would come with him. We'd all go to this restaurant, and Eddie would, I don't know how to describe it, but you would laugh till you cried. Of all the things that he would say and do with the waitresses and stuff, it just...
It's like a magic convention. When the guys get together, it's just a good time.
Yeah, it was. Mike Skinner was one of Eddie's main friends, and in fact, I think Mike Skinner even used to sleep over there, because that had originally been a motel too, I guess. And Eddie did a lot of peaks, and often that he would do a side steal, which I always thought was neat, and I learned to do it. And Michael Skinner, could do it. But the only thing is, when he did it, the deck would not move. There would be no motion. And I asked him one time if I could sit at an exposed angle and watch the move. And I did, and that card came out of there just like floating in the air and floated out of the deck and onto the top, and no motion at all. And that was a lesson for me, because I learned at that time that the reason he could do that, not just because he was practicing a lot, but he was like the guy that could run the 100 under 10. And I could practice the rest of my life, and I was never going to be able to do it like he did it. I mean, I could do it, but I'm going to have to use misdirection and timing, and I'm going to have to get around. Him, you could just look at what he was doing and still not see it. But because a lot of guys beat their head against the wall trying to do stuff that they really can't do, but simplicity is genius. So, on the other side of the coin is, if you can make it simple, you've really done something. As simple is always the best way to go, But, and they would all be learning a certain move every time I came out. So whatever they did, that's what I learned, So I ended up learning a lot of moves, but I didn't have any tricks with them.
Wow. Well,
not until later on in life, I picked out the ones that I could use, and you could know 3 tricks and still be a successful magician if you really wanted to, So
well, I always bring up Don Allen when it comes to that. I mean, that guy only did 10 tricks his entire career, but I mean, he worked trade shows. He was on, the equivalent of the Tonight Show, whoever that was at the time, and I mean, he was everywhere, and I think he only knew 10 tricks, but he did them extremely well.
Yeah, that's the real answer to it. It's not the quantity, it's the quality. Not what you do, how you do it, and so. So that was a great learning experience out there. And also, after I got out of the service, before I went to Houdini's, I worked for George and Company in Buffalo, and they were at the time one of the largest manufacturers of gambling equipment in the country. And
oh wow, never heard of them.
In the back room, I made dice. I milled the dice and drilled the spots and painted the dice, and but we had everything. And I met every crook from Toronto to Miami, and I never met a crook I didn't like.
Wow, they're always very likable. I mean, they have to be.
That's it, and he would, George would let me hang around when he was talking to the real gamblers, and, there's a special lingo, that they have, and you have to learn all that. But the dice that we made were, sometimes it would take 12, 14 different machines to make those dice,
Wow.
And they were perfectly square to, I think, one, I don't know, 10,000th of an inch or something. But they had a lot of unusual machinery that you can't go just out and buy, and so that was an interesting job. We had all kinds of gaffed equipment. We had magnetic loads, and we loaded dice with gold and with platinum, and we had George did all the magnetic loads things, and a lot of times people would bring in parts of gambling tables that he worked on with electronics, and it was just kind of like related to magic, but
kind of. I mean, it's kind of related. I mean, there's people that making their living today doing stuff with that and calling it a magic trick, but really it's just a gambling cheat.
Yeah.
Do you have any of that stuff in your collection?
Probably, but very few. Even at the time, I couldn't afford to buy the loaded dice. I don't know what they cost now, but they were expensive then. And we would, he had a couple of books, little black books there, and they had all these names and addresses in them. And I remember one time I came in and I took an order on the phone from some guy in Florida for some special dice, and then I gave it to George, and he says, well, we can't send this stuff through the mail. And then later on that day, we were making all these things. And then later on in the afternoon, they sent me to the post office. I was the one that went to the post office. And the reason I went is because there was a Your Host coffee shop right next to the post office, and I'd stop and have coffee, In fact, I even told them that's what I did, but I don't think they believed me. But there was, maybe every month or so, a couple of guys would come in and they would have big trays of dice, velvet lined boxes, and inside was the dice, uncanceled dice from every casino in Vegas they had there. Wow. And every couple of weeks, another 2 guys would come in and they would have marked cards. We had every marked card that existed, and we had luminous marked cards too. George would would mark them himself, But so that was an interesting business. I enjoyed that.
Wow, you could write a book just on that. It's so much fun, so awesome. You can go down a whole rabbit hole doing. You could probably do a whole podcast alone just on gambling techniques and stories about gamblers and cheats and luminous cards and everything. Luminous mark cards. It'd be amazing.
That would be very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a fella in Las Vegas whose name is Ron Conley, just like mine, and he runs a casino, and he is an expert at gambling. He does all the moves and stuff, and he's on the web. You can find him on the web. But what happens is people go on the web, they look up Ron Conley, and they get his thing, and they read about him. And then they come to the magic shop, and I hear things like, boy, I'd like to know what you have already forgotten.
Wow.
I never did tell anybody that wasn't me, because that was so great when they talked about me.
That's funny.
Yeah, that is.
But go ahead.
Next time I go to Vegas, I'm going to look him up and tell him that. I wonder what he'll think.
Wow. Well, you after knowing you a few years, I bought a collection of magic at a magic convention or somewhere, and I'm going through it and I'm looking at all these books, and I saw a Just Say No book, and I put it on my bookshelf, and it sat there for a while. Then I pulled it out right before vacation one year, and I was like, holy crap, this is written by that guy that owns that magic shop, and devoured the whole thing. So you literally wrote the book on Just Say No shows. Tell me about those. And you did every school in South Carolina doing Just Say No shows?
Yeah, pretty much. Every elementary and primary school I did. I was doing about 300 assemblies a year, and I hit it just right, and I had the right program and had everything reduced to the lowest common denominator. And I went all over the state. I had 2 or 3 years that were really great, right within the state of South Carolina. Eventually, I ended up working in about 5 different states, and then towards the end, the Department of the Navy booked me I did then 3 years in a row, and I did all the military installations on the East Coast and some on the Gulf Coast. I mean, it's all, I did Coast Guard, the Marines, the Army, the Navy, everything. And the interesting part about that is when I was trying to book this, I had sent a video to, and I can't remember how I got onto it, but I had sent a video to Pensacola, and the gal that does the booking looked at the video, and she liked the show, and she gave me a tentative schedule and asked me to send invoices for that, which I did. And then in a short period of time, I got a call from her, and she got the invoices, and get this, she told me, you didn't charge enough.
Oh, wow.
And she says, why don't you send me some new invoices?
Oh,
so
wow.
I doubled everything and sent them back to her, and that was the first of 3 years of bookings. But I think they had other people who were doing these types of shows for them, and they were charging them a lot of money, and apparently they were flying them back and forth to all the shows and everything. I didn't know about this. Eventually I found out about that, because when I did the shows, like when I went to Fort Bragg, they were shocked that I showed up at the schools, did the show, and went back to the hotel. They were expecting to drive me around and chauffeur me, and, they were really surprised, that I just did what I normally do,
Wow.
And, but that was good. You don't normally, something like that you wouldn't normally get 3 years in a row, but I am. And then when she was transferred out, I lost it. But, that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
Oh, we've had that with school shows and resorts
everything.
and everything. Once your contact person goes, the new person knows a better way to run the company or a better way to run the company
or they
picnic.
just want to do something different that wasn't the same thing as the person before them. So yeah.
Yeah, it's. But I like the school shows. I think that's the greatest audience in the world. I don't think it gets any better than the kids, and the experiences I've had with them are just terrific. Yeah.
Well, I told you during the pre-interview that, I've had shows where the kids were yelling so loud, it felt like the Beatles before the curtain opened. They're cheering and, screaming. And then you get the other schools where the principal's so demanding of them, sit down, don't you say a word, you only clap when he asks you to clap and do that. And then they don't act like a normal audience, so I've had that too.
Yeah.
I did one show where I was the first assembly they've ever had at the school, and the principal had been there 20 years. And have the curtains drawn, I'm setting up my act, and it's getting kind of warm, so I figured I'd go to open the curtains. But as I started to open the curtains, I noticed that the whole cafeteria was filled with kids. And they weren't making a sound.
Oh my goodness.
There.
Wow.
So I closed the curtains and went on setting up, and then when I got ready to open the curtains again, they were gone, and I hadn't heard anything. So he really had them under control, And I worked another show. This is a good one. I had worked another show where the principal told me that they had just had a magician there recently, and then apparently he had problems with the audience, and so he literally packed up his whole act right in front of them, picked it up, and walked out the door. And
what the heck?
He said, "You won't do that, will you?" Of course, I just laughed, and we had a great show, but they must have really got to that fellow.
That's one of my pet peeves, though. I mean, you got to start somewhere, Ron. I mean, we all were awful at the beginning. We all, picked up a Svengali deck and had no idea what we were doing when we started out. But anybody can get a business card, say they're a magician, call a school, give them a price, and get booked. Anybody. Yeah. Very rarely do these schools vet people. So this guy obviously didn't know what the heck he was doing and had to pack up his show. I'm done. He might have quit show business that day. That's hilarious.
I felt kind of sorry for him, But I run into a lot of things. I remember one show, it was a repeat show. I don't think they knew it was a repeat, that I had been there to their school before, but they insisted on having this show in this auditorium, and the auditorium had an orchestra pit, and that whole orchestra pit was filled with desks and chairs and computers and all kinds of junk. And then behind that was the stage. And I'm thinking to myself, well, it's going to be harder to get a rapport with the audience because I got all this garbage in front of me, and it just isn't right. And but I did the show, and it was okay, but it wasn't like what it should have been. And after the show, the teacher came up to me and she says, "You should have been here last year. That guy really knew how to handle kids."
Wow.
I didn't tell her it was me. So you can, one week you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, and the next week you're just a magician. But you have to expect that. That's what happens. You can't, ride high all the time. So, and I knew that, but I got a kick out of her saying that.
We had a show. It was either Richmond or Virginia Beach, and they got grant money to hire a big show. They wanted our biggest show. No, don't worry about price because we got grant money. It's free money. We're going to blow it. Whatever you charge us is going to be great. So we charged them our going rate for our biggest show that we had, which was a full evening magic and illusion show. It takes us 4 hours to set this thing up. It's a big show, Ron. So during intermission, Natalie's selling magic, and I'm resetting illusions and resetting animals, getting ready for the second half. Come out, do the second half. The lights are in our eyes. We can't see beyond the first 3 rows anyway. At the end of the show, they turn the house lights on, and there is a quarter of the audience that was originally there. Less than that? I don't know, Ron. It was very thin.
Yeah.
And we asked the principal, said, "What happened? Did they not like our show? I mean, the people that stayed loved it. What happened?" He said that's why we have the grant money. They've never had live entertainment here, and they didn't know what an intermission was. You didn't explain an intermission well enough to them. They thought that an intermission meant that you reset to do the same thing again. I mean, wow! That never crossed our mind. That you tell people, hey, we're gonna do a 15-minute intermission. We'll be right back. You usually don't have to say more than that,
Yeah.
Crazy,
Yeah.
crazy.
It's very, yeah. I worked some schools, older schools that were built when Houdini was still alive. And the old schools, they all are like vaudeville houses. They've got this dressing rooms under the stage, and I could see where trap doors had been cut out. And then the thing that I really like about the old schools is you walk to the back of the stage, and there's a door, and you open it up, and you're outside.
Yeah.
In the new schools, every time I pack stuff into a school, I think to myself, well, the guy who designed this auditorium had never packed anything into a building, or he would have put a door in the back of the stage there,
Some of these load entrances don't even make sense. Not at and parking to get near the back door. Yeah. You have to go 4 different hallways to exit the building.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So, getting back to you and getting back to your crazy everything that you've done, it's so much. We could do 5 podcasts about it. In my collection, I have a lot of old magazines and everything, and you're on the cover of a Topps magazine. Topps was the Abbott's Magic magazine. Abbott's in Colon, Michigan, had their own Magic magazine. How'd you get on the cover of that? Just being a demonstrator?
No, Gene Gordon, was worked for Blackstone before, and he knew Nick. I'm searching for his name. I started to say Nick Cross, but that's not it. So, I'm drawing a blank. He knew people at the thing there, and Gene did all he could to promote me. Like when we go to a convention, he would tell the people that I had to be on the show. I mean, Gene was, of course, he started the IBM, and if he said something, everybody listened, and so he put me on all the shows, and that was a great experience for me. In fact, I did so many conventions that even to this day, I can't. I have trouble going to a convention if I'm not performing because I don't know what to do when I get there. And it's just so used to being on the show. But that's how that happened, and I was just making my move. He knew I was, that would help me. In fact, the book, the Say No to Drug Show book, that's. I wasn't really exactly, in my mind, I wasn't writing a book. I was preparing a big brochure for later on. I had hoped to go other places with this drug show and make it really big time. And I figured the book would be like my best brochure, So, I never did do that, but that was my thought in mind. I wanted the book for promotion more than anything,
Well, that's a big thing in marketing. This guy literally wrote the book on Just Say No shows. You might as well hire him. You're done. That is a brochure, yeah.
Yeah, but they didn't. The schools eventually did. They considered it a motivational show, but that's how they termed it. They didn't say no to drugs, so it was motivational. But I worked for the DARE program, and I worked for Just Say No, and I worked for Alcohol and Drug Abuse Commission, and I had, towards the end, I even would get sponsors for the shows. I didn't have, as the drug shows tapered off, that's what I did is I got sponsors for all the shows, and that worked out pretty good too.
Well, and you also, we got like 10 more minutes left, so I'm skipping ahead here. You also worked at the Magic Castle with Kuda Bucks. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Kuda Bucks. Yeah, that was quite an experience. I was in the, I guess you call it the cellar, and then and he was unbelievable. If he really did what he said he did, it wouldn't look any different than what it did. I don't know how he could do everything and do it so fast and so positively. It was just, it looked really real to me.
Natalie's looking at me as, who's Cuda Bucks? Cuda Bucks would do a blindfold act where he'd put dough in his eyes, $50, then dough. You'd smush the dough, duct tape, turbans, everything around his eyes. And you'd write something on a chalkboard, and he'd look at you, and he'd copy it exactly.
Oh, wow.
With chalk on a chalkboard.
Very cool.
With all this stuff. Yeah, it's amazing.
I still to this day can't believe it. But I worked with, and then I'm trying to think who the other performer was. I want to say Johnny Plant. I'm not sure, but he had this big rope. It was about 6 foot long and maybe 3 inches around, and he would talk about the Hindu rope trick and the little Hindu boy this and the little Hindu boy. And then when he got to the part where it was time to do the rope trick, he'd look out into the audience and he'd say, well, is there a small Hindu boy in the audience? And then, of course, there wasn't, so he'd throw the rope over his shoulder and he'd say, no Hindu boy, no Hindu rope trick.
Can't do that one.
And one night, some people brought a small Hindu boy in.
Oh, no.
And I can't remember what he did, but it was quite a laugh. And I'll tell you what else happened. I had in my table, at that time I always did this, I would have a Svengali deck, an invisible deck, and a mental photography deck, which is, for all practical intents and purposes, especially from a layman's point of view, is a card magic act. If anything went wrong during my show that I couldn't handle, I have another little act right there that I could do. And one night when I came out, I was doing a cigarette production. I did John Booth's act from Marvels of Mystery or something. I forget what it was, the one with the stack of glasses. Anyway, all the cigarette loads on one side dropped on the floor. I don't know, I guess I didn't pin them good, but they dropped on the floor. So now you can work around that, but at the time I just didn't feel going through all the motions to get around that, so I grabbed those 3 decks and I just did those. And the show went as well as it did if I didn't do the cards.
Wow.
And right away I was thinking, well, gee, if all I had to do was these 3 decks, I could be upstairs having fun like the rest of the guys, But that was, again, a lesson, It's those 3 decks we pitched at Houdini's. You could buy any one deck for a certain price. You could buy any 2 decks for another price, and you could buy all 3 decks for another price. And so we got real good at those decks, and I eventually reinvented the Svengali deck, and I call it the con deck, and it becomes a story trick in which the cards change colors and stuff, and that's something I think you'd like. I'll send you one.
I'd love it. I'd love it. Well, we're running out of time here, Ron. I wanted you to tell my wife about your daily routine. Now that you're semi-retired, the magic shop's now closed. You're still doing 100 shows a year. So if you're listening to this and you want an awesome magician for your family show or kid's birthday party, give Ron a call. He's seen it all, done it all. He is the man. But tell Natalie about your daily routine. I love it.
Okay, well, when I get up in the morning, first thing I do is I sit on the bed as I grab these 12 palming coins, or Nielsen palming coins, and I put them into a classic palm position in my right hand, and I produce them one at a time, and then I do a whole coin routine with those. And then I put those down, and I grab a stack of quarters, and I do the same thing with a stack of quarters. And when I'm in the bathroom brushing my teeth, I do a thimble routine, which is based on using the lids from toothpaste and stuff. And I got a whole little thimble act that I do there.
I love it. I want thimbles in my bathroom now.
That's awesome. That's what, I think Wes is going to take over your routine. I just see it coming. I just know it.
Hey, Ron, thank you for being on here today, man. I've had a blast. Thank you. Before you retired, we knew the Magic Shop was going to go. When did you close it? On what birthday? That was the big deal. You closed it on a certain birthday.
Did I? I don't know. Do I close it on my birthday?
Yeah, it was your birthday. It was like when you turned 70, or there was a certain. You closed it when you turned 70, maybe. I guess so.
Yeah. Oh, I'll be 77 in January.
Has it been closed 7 years already?
Geez, time flies.
Wow. Well, I remember talking to you that last year, and when that shop was closing, Ron, I can't tell you how much I love that shop. I mean, spending 8 hours on my vacation, I look forward to that 8 hours all year long. That's how much I love the Magic Shop. And it was like saying goodbye to you and saying goodbye to that shop. It was like mourning the loss of a friend, man.
He did mourn. He definitely mourned. And when we went back to Myrtle Beach the next time and it wasn't there, he was not happy.
It's not the same.
He didn't have his Magic Shop to go to. So.
But we were talking about doing magic lectures. Have you done any lectures? Would you be willing to do lectures if our magician friends listening would like to hire you for a magic lecture, whether it be over Zoom or something like that?
Yeah, I haven't tried Zoom. In fact, this was my first podcast, and I do some lectures at conventions. I used to do Cadabra and some conventions and family entertainment workshops in Vegas, and circus magic. I've done lectures at Gatlinburg. I don't do a lot of lectures, but I have done some, and I could do more.
Well, perfect. Well, look him up at themagicofronconley.com, and you can find you on Facebook just under Ron Conley. Ron, thanks a million for being here today, man. We had a blast. Thank you, dude.
Oh, thank you.
You're awesome, man. Just stay on the line real quick. I have a couple plugs, and then we'll wrap this thing up. On January 27th at 7 p.m., we'll be doing our full evening Magic and Illusion show live on stage, but zoomed.
22nd, not 27th. Just to let you know.
January 20th. Let me start that whole thing again.
Yes.
On January 22nd at 7 p.m., we'll be doing our full evening Magic and Illusion show live on stage, but zoomed into the comfort of your living room. This is a fundraiser show for a couple different elementary schools, and the proceeds will truly help them out. For tickets or more information on the event, go to wesisley.com and check out the events page. Also, all 16 episodes of Wes Iseli's Magiclife, Season 1, are now available on Jewel TV. Jewel TV is on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire, the Jewel TV app, and tons of other places. It's in over 100 million households. And for a limited time, it is also on YouTube. You can catch up on Season 1 before Season 2 debuts in February. See you next week. Today's episode of the podcast is sponsored by Express Copy and Graphics. Mention promo code Wes Iseli to get 10% off. Their website is expresscopy.com. That's XPRESS-COPY.com. They do it all. Copies, banners, signs, vehicle wraps, promo items, practically anything you need printed, they can do it for you. These guys are great. Check them out. Check us out online at wesisley.com and patreon.com/Wes_Iseli for behind-the-scenes videos, blooper videos, never-before-seen footage, discounts on merchandise, magic trick tutorials, and more. That's Wes Iseli, spelled WESISELI.